Hello everyone, today's tutorial will be about veils and tutus and crinolines, all manner of gathered netting materials like tulle and crinoline and net in various colors and stiffnesses and different media. And I'm going to start with color pencil. I'm going to have a list of all the materials that I use in this video in the description box. And you can check that out if you really fall in love with a set of colors that I use. But, in these tutorials, it's not really a matter of the individual items that I use and colors that I use. It's really more about the technique that I show using the different media. But I'll have the list because so many of you want it. So yeah, I was sick for a long time and I apologize for the absence. If you follow me on various social media, then you know that I was sick for 10 days, just like completely out of commission, exhausted, coughing, looking like death warmed over. And then I went on a 4-day trip to Mexico, which had been planned for almost a year. And I was on the fence about going. My husband convinced me, just lay out on the sand. It can't be any worse than laying in bed. So I went to Mexico, and that was really lovely. And then I came back, and then I got food poisoning. So then I was out of commission for another 2 days. And yeah, I'm done being sick. Oh my God, I'm so over it. So over it. Anyway, so tulle, here we go. Now, I have a checklist that I run through anytime I'm rendering a fabric. And because I've been doing it for so many years, it's gotten to the point where it's automatic for me now. But here's the checklist. Number 1, select your media. So for this one, I'm doing color pencil and I'm working on Bristol. So I always match the paper to what medium I'm using. And then number 2, I select my colors. So I pulled all the color pencils, I tested them. I always test on a scrap of paper that is identical to my final paper. So I tested all my colors out. If I'm painting, I sit there and I mix and test all the colors before I get started. Number 3, I draw the garment with 2 things. Number 1, remembering your wraparounds. Okay, I have a whole video devoted to wraparounds, okay, and how hems have to consider the ellipse, necklines, collars, everything wraps around our cylindrical body parts. So you got to draw according to your wraparounds, and then you have to draw according to the drape of the fabric that you're rendering. Now I have a velvet gown, okay, so it's just simple, it cuts close to the body. And then I have this 3-tier tulle back train, and my pencil lines are very light, delicate. Okay, my gathers all go in one direction, and my outlines are really light. And I did draw a light hem, but once I colored it in, you'll notice that I erased them because I don't even want that thick border. Okay, tulle, net, crinoline, those things, they do not need to be hemmed, and they're often not hemmed. If they're hemmed, it's because the designer wanted a very specific look, like edging it with ribbon or edging with, some kind of beading or whatnot, but not to hem to finish because tulle doesn't unravel. Okay? So you don't need to. And often, when you gather tulle is so light that you have to gather like 10x. Okay, so if you want like a foot of like really fluffy gathers, you might have to gather in 7, 8, 10 feet of tulle. Do you want to really hem all that if you don't need to because it won't unravel? Yeah, no, You don't, okay? So make sure that you're paying attention in the design of your garment to how things are going to be hemmed, okay? And then number 5, you fill in your background color and add your 3 kinds of shadow, right? And as you're rendering, you need to pay attention to the heaviness and the lightness of your fabric. With the velvet, everything is just very solid, and so I just laid down the base color. I laid down my shadow color, not worrying about it. I want it smooth, solid, straight up. Optionally, you can use a blending tool to soften and blend your color pencil work. You can use blending pencils, you can use rubbing alcohol, you can use baby oil, and I go through all these blending techniques in my Shading for Color Pencils video in my Fundamental Fridays playlist. But you know, I played with the baby oil today because that's the thing that I had the least amount of practice using. And, you know, I'm not loving it. You know, like the more I play with the baby oil, the less I like the effect and overall, like I'll go over it, you know, I'll kind of update you guys, but I am really leaning towards the rubbing alcohol and the blending pencils more so than the baby oil. With my tool, I kept my pencil strokes light. I kept them always going in the direction of the tool. And when you have anything that's gathered, it's always shadow base, shadow base, shadow base. And so that's why I always take the darker color and I put in all those gathered drape lines. Okay, and if you watch me do my pencil work now, it's the gathers that get the most punch, okay? Not a super fat outline. I definitely don't do a solid line for the hem. The darkest lines are the gathers because that's the most prominent feature of these gathered tool styles. I'm going to go in with a darker pencil and just punch out some of the shadows in the drape, in the scrunching, the shearing, the gathering, whatever you want to call it. So you have the depth. And then the tops of each tier get a drop shadow from the tier above it. And so I put in a little bit more shadow along the top edge. But constantly moving in the direction of the gathers, not like a solid bar of shadow running across. Next, I'm going to use these Koh-i-noor Tritone color pencils to do a much stiffer kind of a net tutu on this little ballerina girl. And I got these Tritones in a sketch box. I like them. They're not my favorite. The quality is okay. I do like the depth of having the 3 tones in each color, and I've been having fun rendering hair with these because the different tones give hair the depth, because most hair is not all one color. So it's been good for that. And this tutu, again, select media, select colors. I didn't draw the drapes in advance, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted the stiff, straight, short tutu. I drew that first ellipse in the beginning, following my wraparounds, and using a short, aggressive pencil strokes, I created the stiffness of the tool that I wanted. And again, I didn't go in and try to put in a lot of heavy outline hems because tool doesn't need to be hemmed. Let's put a tutu on this guy. And let's go back to our checklist. Number 1, select media. This one I'm going to do in markers. And so I did the underdrawing on marker paper. And many of you who are channel regulars know that Bienfang marker paper is my preferred marker paper brand of choice. And on the Bienfang, the right side of the paper the good side you want to render on is on the back. So I draw on the top, I flip the paper over, and I render with markers on the back of the paper. And I do this a lot because it helps me not smudge, so that I can render with marker super fast without worrying about smudging the pencil work. So again, I am testing all my marker colors together to see if I can get a nice shadow family together. Number 3, draw the garment obeying the drape of the fabric. I'm using kind of a limp tulle here. And so it's soft, there's a fullness, but it kind of falls softly. And drawing garments using smiles and frowns. So the hem is raggedy, but the waist still follows a soft wraparound ellipse. And then fill in the background color and add your 3 kinds of shadow using the various depths of marker color to create the gathered look, which is the base color, shadow color, base color, shadow color, alternating to create that gathered look. And then again, to go in with a pencil. Even when I'm rendering tulle with marker, I like to add a little bit of color pencil for texture. And then I'll go in with a graphite pencil and punch out some details. And again, like I do some of the ripples along the hem to kind of show that they're ripped and ragged, but not solid outline of the hem unless that is really precisely the look you are going for. And now I'm doing everything on a more standard tutu in the marker just to show you what that looks like. But the checklist and how to approach it are exactly the same as I did the other 2. Notice when I draw the top row of gathers, I'm always showing the 3D-ness of all the gathers, okay, all these little round bumps, compared to that waistband. On the guy, you don't see that because the top is tucked into his jacket, but on the gown, on this thing, you want to see the round bumps of the top of the gathers. So here's the thing about gathered tulle. Okay, it's going to be really opaque where it's gathered, along the waistband. And then it's going to be sheerer as it's not gathered. It's single ply or only double ply. And so you can see the body or the clothes underneath as the tulle opens up and is not packed and gathered, right? So when you have a tutu like this, when you get towards the hem, as the tulle gets looser and looser, you're going to see some of the skin underneath. It's going to be sheer towards the bottom. And so when you're rendering this, you want to bring up some of that skin tone under the skirt. So with a marker, you want to push and fade up into the skirt. Paint, color pencil, same thing. So that you push your marker up, you push your color pencil up so that it fades to nothing, but it goes past the hemline. Then you marker the tutu. And again, the lightest colors are on the bottom. The darker colors where the gathers are pretty much only at the top. And yeah, like I like to erase the hemline most of the time. Every once in a while, I will put in a little very delicate pencil line, but most of the time I leave the hem undrawn. And so you do see that little bit of the overlap. You can see her knees through the bottom sheer portion of the tutu. Okay, and so now that I'm going in and drawing it, I push the pencil up too. Okay, kind of letting it fade up. When I do white, when I'm rendering white fabrics, my preference is to paint white fabrics using an opaque white gouache on colored paper. Right now, I'm using a 98-pound Canson paper with a slight tooth to it, and I'm just using a Holbein white gouache in various opacities. If you watched my how to render sheer fabrics video, the first one, the original that goes over kind of the basics of all sheer fabrics. You know that I either grab multiple shades of one marker color, you know, like the same purple but in different shades, and then, or I mix up different dilutions of a color. Like take this white, for example. I have a sheer, very watery white. I have a slightly opaque white. I have a super opaque white, right? So marker, paint, whatever. I have all these shades of one color. And then I start by laying down the lightest, sheerest color all the way across. Now, if I were doing this as a complete rendering, I would have completely painted and finished the woman under the veil first. I would have done the whole thing, face, hair, dress, skin, all of it, whether it's under the veil or not. And I would have let that dry 317.7% and then gone in with the veil on top. And I would have been very careful. I wouldn't have run my brush really harshly across the paper, but almost like dab it on neatly so that I'm not messing up the underlayer. And then I'm taking a skinnier brush with more opaque white and putting in the layers where the shears are doubled over. Okay. If you need to, go watch that shears video. That shears video, I do it in marker, but the techniques are the same. Okay, the approach is the same. So now I'm going in with that same skinny marker, and I'm putting in more and more opaque layers. Okay. What you're not seeing now is in between every layer of paint, I'm letting the whole thing dry. Okay, so when I was doing this demo, I painted the first couple of layers of this, and then I did my color pencil, and then I came back and I did more layers of this, and then I painted something else. So I'm putting it together so it makes sense, but keep in mind, always let your layers of work dry before you put down another layer of paint. Because if you put more opaque paint on top of wet sheer paper, that's just, you know, the paint is just going to go all over the place, okay? It won't stay in the one spot. You know how when I teach you guys wet on wet, it's like you have the water there, the paper is wet, and so when you put the paint down, the paint goes everywhere? Yeah, if you want certain sections to be deliberately opaque, you don't want the paint to go all over the place. You want to keep it in the sections. And so you need to wait for the base layer to dry, and then you put in the opaque layers, and then you wait for all that to dry, add in a little bit of gray for your shadows. You know, when you do something that's like a fluffy white tulle veil, you don't want a lot of heavy gray shadows, okay? Keep it light, keep it really subtle, and the rest of the garment, the way you drew things, the way you shadowed the rest of it is going to help everything look 3D. Here, I'm just, you know, bonus, okay? I'm just doing a little light purple tulle overlay dress with gouache. I'm using a 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, and I put down a soft layer of the lilac. You know, whenever you see the back of the dress, you always got to draw the back. You know, when you have big coats and it's open, you're going to see the back of the coat, okay? These dresses, when you pick up the front, or let's say you have a mullet gown, you know, party in the front, business in the back, real short in the front, you're going to see the back, right? And so you got to draw the back. You got to make sure that you drew your ellipse for the hem, okay? So make sure that the back of the dress isn't longer than your foot. Okay, otherwise it's going to look like your foot is stepping on the back of your dress, right? So notice how I cut the hem off behind the heel. And then when you paint it, it has to be darker. The whole thing is in shadow. It's like the inside of a dress. So the whole thing is in shadow. So you got to mix up a shadow color and paint all that in there. And then the rest is the same as I've been repeating myself throughout this whole video. Go in with darker colors. When you're painting, make sure your layers are dry as you work. And you can add some color pencil for texture. And when you go in with more pencil detail, make sure that the emphasis is on the gathers and not a heavy hem or outline, or you're going to lose kind of the soft, light feel of the tulle layers. All right. Now look at this. I'm taking my purple color pencil and I'm trying to put in some texture, but this left side, you know, where that big bump is, it's not dry all the way, and so the color isn't showing up as much as I would like. So just learn from my desire to move this tutorial along really fast, okay? And then because that first layer of tulle in the front is sheer, you're gonna see a little bit of the leg, you know, under a little bit of that hem. And if I were doing a full rendering, I would have done the legs first, to be honest. If you watch my shears video or my lace video, then you know that anytime I do a shear, I always do the whatever's underneath first, whether it's a dress or skin. I'm still a little bit tired, feeling a little bit under the weather, but I'm getting back on video schedule. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and share, subscribe, all those good things. And I will see you in the next video.